My daughter thought she was marrying a devoted doctor. I heard him call it Phase 1, with a smug look on his face that the plan was going to work so easily to get her to sign the papers, and he had already drained the account, so I handed the phone to a detective and let the ceremony continue. When the police stepped out of the pews, the room fell silent. The look on his face when the handcuffs rang. It was worth the sleepless nights. If you want the full story, let me take you on the emotional journey of exposing a liar. My name is Evelyn Ross. I'm 55 years old, and today is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My only daughter, Claire, is getting married to a man everyone calls perfect, but in 3 minutes, that perfect man is going to be arrested, right here in front of 200 people, and I'll be the one who made it happen. It's strange what a mother feels when she's about to blow up her own daughter's wedding. My hands aren't shaking from guilt. They're shaking from relief. Relief that this nightmare is finally ending. The ocean is calm today. We're in Bayshore, a quiet coastal town where people still smile at strangers and gossip travels faster than wind. The wedding is beautiful. White roses, soft music, and the smell of salt in the air. Everything looks picture perfect. But that's what makes it harder. Because behind every perfect photo, there's a story you'd never post. Claire doesn't see me right now. She's inside, fixing her veil, surrounded by laughter. She thinks her life is about to begin. She has no idea it's about to shatter, or that I've been fighting for months to keep her safe from the man standing at the altar. His name is Dr. Ethan Cole. At least that's what he calls himself. Everyone in town knows him as the charming young doctor who volunteers at the local clinic. But I know the truth. He's not a doctor. He's a liar who built his career on stolen identities and fake credentials. A man who's conned more than one woman before my daughter. And if I hadn't started digging, he would have taken everything. Her money, her name, her future. 6 months ago, when Claire first brought him home, I wanted to like him. I really did. I remember the night clearly, roast chicken on the table, candles burning low, and that easy smile of his that never reached his eyes. He complimented my cooking, asked about my late husband, and told me how much he admired strong women. And maybe he really does, as long as he can use them. I didn't say anything that night. Mothers don't ruin dinners with suspicions. We wait. We listen. We let people show us who they are. Well, he showed me. Every Sunday dinner since then, he'd slip in questions about our house, about my husband's insurance, about how much Claire inherited. He always made it sound casual, even caring, but I've been a nurse long enough to know when someone's checking vital signs. And Ethan wasn't checking on Claire's health. He was checking her worth. When I realized what he was doing, I didn't confront him. I learned from life. You don't yell at a snake, you wait for it to curl itself into a corner. So I smiled, I cooked, I let him think I believed every word. Meanwhile, I started collecting everything. Emails, bank slips, photos, people who'd met him before he became Dr. Cole. Turns out there was no medical license, no degree, not even his real name. That envelope I'm holding right now, it's not a wedding card. It's the evidence that will put him in prison. I keep it close to my chest as the guests take their seats. The choir starts to sing softly, and the breeze smells like lilies and salt. Everyone around me is smiling, recording, waiting for love to happen. They have no idea this ceremony is about to turn into a crime scene. I look toward the aisle, Ethan standing there tall, confident, pretending to be nervous like every good groom should. He doesn't know the police are already waiting outside the church parking lot, ready for my signal. He doesn't know this whole wedding has been a setup from the start. Mine, not his. You might think I'm cruel. Maybe you'll say I should have let my daughter learn her own lesson, but you don't get to that age without realizing something. Sometimes being a good mother means becoming the villain in your child's story, at least for a while. Because love, real love, isn't about watching quietly while your child walks into a trap. Love is about dragging her out of it, even if she hates you for doing it. So I sit here, breathing slowly, pretending to pray. My husband Thomas used to say I could read people's hearts better than any doctor could read a chart. I wish he were here now. He'd know what to do with the shaking in my hands. 3 minutes left. The organ begins. The guests rise. And through the open doors I see her, my beautiful Claire, glowing, holding her bouquet like it's made of light. She catches my eyes and smiles. I smile back, even though my throat burns. Because I'm about to break her heart. To save it. I whisper under my breath, I prayed to see this day. Just not like this. Then I press my thumb on the message ready in my phone, the one that will change everything. 5 years before that wedding day, my house didn't smell like flowers or sea breeze. It smelled like medicine and goodbyes. My husband, Thomas Ross, had been sick for almost a year. Lung cancer, stage 4. And even though we both worked in healthcare, me as a nurse, him as a hospital engineer, nothing prepared us for how cruelly quiet dying can sound. The machines beep, the clock ticks, but the person you love slips away so slowly you start counting the seconds between breaths. Claire was 26 then. She used to come home from work, still wearing her office badge, and sit by her father's bed just to hold his hand. She talked to him about everything, her job at the charity, the people she helped, the hope she still had for the world. She wanted him to believe that life outside that room was still beautiful. And Thomas, even near the end, he always smiled when she spoke. He'd whisper to me when she left the room, "She's got your stubbornness, Evie. Don't ever let anyone break that." The night before he passed, the rain never stopped. I sat beside him, counting drips from the IV. He reached out, cold fingers, weak but sure, and held my hand. His voice was barely a breath. "Promise me you'll protect her, even if she doesn't understand why." And I said yes. I said it because I thought I had decades to keep that promise, not realizing life would test me so soon. He was gone before sunrise. At the funeral, the church smelled of lilies and wet wool coats. Claire looked so small and black. When everyone left, she stayed behind by the casket, tracing her father's name on the brass plate. Then she turned to me and said something I've never forgotten. "Mom, I'll never love anyone you don't trust." She meant it. And at that moment, it sounded like a blessing. I didn't know it would one day feel like a curse, because life doesn't always give you the luxury of trusting first. The years after Thomas's death were quiet but heavy. I stayed in our old house by the bay, the one he'd built plank by plank before Claire was even born. Every creak in the floor still carried his footsteps. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch with coffee and talk to him, out loud, just to fill the silence. People thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But grief makes you do small, strange things to stay alive. Work kept me moving. I'd been promoted to head nurse at Bayshore Community Hospital. My days were full of people who needed things I could actually fix. Medication, comfort, a warm blanket. It helped. Because when you can't heal your own heart, you learn to patch up everyone else's. Claire visited every weekend. She worked for a nonprofit called Hope Aid, helping rebuild homes after hurricanes. She'd come in smelling like drywall and sunshine, hair tied back, still that mix of softness and grit she got from her father. We'd cook together, talk about the people. She helped. She always ended our nights by saying, "Dad would be proud." And I'd smile even when the lump in my throat burned. For a while, it felt like we'd found our rhythm. Just two women learning how to live with ghosts. Then, one spring afternoon, everything shifted. I was folding laundry when the phone rang. It was Claire, panicked, breathless. Her car had broken down on the highway near the old Lighthouse Road. She said she was fine, that someone had stopped to help. A doctor, she said. A really nice guy. He fixed her tire, refused money, and even followed her to make sure the car didn't stall again. I remember laughing with relief. "See?" I told her. "Good people still exist." She laughed back. "His name's Ethan Cole," she said. "He's new in town, works at the clinic. You'd like him." It was such a small moment, so ordinary. But in hindsight, that's how every storm starts. Quietly, almost kindly. That night, Claire came by for dinner, glowing like she'd just discovered a secret. She told me about Ethan, how he'd moved from Boston after years in private practice, how he loved volunteering, how humble he was despite being a doctor. I nodded, smiled, poured her wine, and tried to be happy she was happy. She said, "He reminds me of Dad, the way he listens." And my heart clenched because I could already hear Thomas's voice in my head. Protect her, even if she doesn't understand why. After she left, I stood at the window watching her taillights disappear into the dark. The sea was calm that night, too calm. It's funny how mothers know when peace is lying. I washed the dishes, wiped the counter twice, and sat with my coffee going cold. Somewhere deep down, a voice whispered, "It's starting." I didn't know what it was yet, but I've learned in this life that sometimes the things that change us most don't arrive with thunder. They arrive with a smile, a thank you, and a promise that sounds just a little too perfect. That's how Dr. Ethan Cole walked into our lives, with kindness in his eyes and a lie on his lips. And I, foolishly, hoped it was just kindness. The first time I saw him walk through my front door, I understood why my daughter fell for him. He was the kind of man who looked like he had everything figured out. Calm, confident, the kind of smile that makes people believe him before he even says a word. Dr. Ethan Cole. Tall, well-dressed, polite to a fault. He carried a bottle of red wine and a bouquet of white lilies. Not too much, not too little, just the kind of gesture that says, I know what I'm doing. Claire was glowing. Mom, this is Ethan, she said, her voice proud. He shook my hand firm but not pushy. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Ross. And right then, I felt it. That tiny whisper mothers get when something looks too perfect. I told myself not to be judgmental. After all, it was just dinner. But in my gut, I already knew. This man had practiced his manners the same way actors rehearse their lines. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and roast chicken, my go-to when I want a night to feel comfortable. Ethan complimented everything. You cook like my mother, he said, smiling just enough. Claire laughed, eyes shining. See, I told you, Mom. He appreciates real food. I smiled back, but something in me stayed still. During dinner, he talked about his work at the clinic, how rewarding it was to give back to the community. He told stories that sounded almost rehearsed. A lonely patient who came just to talk, a charity he helped in Boston, the long nights back at Harvard Medical. He dropped the word Harvard so casually that I almost missed it. Almost. He spoke with the rhythm of someone who's been admired before and knows exactly when to pause for effect. And Claire, God bless her, she hung on every word. She looked at him like he was a miracle she'd been too tired to believe in. It had been years since I'd seen her laugh like that. Part of me wanted to thank him for bringing that spark back. The other part of me wanted to ask, who taught you to fake empathy so well? He talked about medicine like a man quoting from a book, not living it. Every answer was perfect, every story lined up too neatly. I kept thinking, he's not telling lies. He's telling memorized truth. After dinner, the three of us sat in the living room. The fireplace hummed softly. The wine made the air warm. Ethan leaned forward and asked about my late husband. I heard Thomas was an engineer, he said. I'd love to hear more about him. That should have been a kind thing to say, but the way he asked, it felt like data collection. Like he was studying me, not listening. Still, I told him how Thomas had built this house, how he loved fixing things that didn't even need fixing. Ethan nodded just enough to show he was paying attention, but his eyes kept flicking to the photos on the mantel, me, Claire, and Thomas by the old sailboat. He looked at them too long, like he was measuring something. The rest of the evening went smooth as silk. Too smooth. He offered to clear the plates. He laughed at my jokes. He even knew how to pronounce Chateau Margaux when I poured the wine. At one point, Claire excused herself to grab dessert from the fridge. That's when Ethan turned to me and said quietly, You remind me of my mother, Mrs. Ross. She was strong too, the kind of woman who kept everyone together. He said it softly, looking right into my eyes. It was supposed to be a compliment, but I felt something tighten inside me. That sentence, it didn't sound like it belonged to this moment. It sounded like a line he'd used before, one that usually worked. I smiled politely, of course. That's what women my age do when something feels off, but we don't have proof. But deep down, a small alarm bell started ringing. When Claire came back, she brought out the apple pie. Ethan took a bite and made that face people make when they want you to think they're having a life-changing dessert. Claire giggled. I laughed too, though my eyes stayed on him. He was good. Too good. Every gesture was designed to make us feel safe. And that's what scared me most, because I've spent 30 years around patients and families, and I know the difference between genuine warmth and calculated charm. When he finally stood to leave, he shook my hand again, both of his wrapped around mine. Thank you for dinner, he said, holding my gaze. I can see where Claire gets her strength. I told him to drive safe. I meant it. I also meant don't come back until I figure out who you really are. The door closed, and for a second the house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Claire turned to me, her face bright as a candle. So, she asked, smiling, what do you think of him? He seems nice, I said carefully. See, I told you. She laughed, kissed my cheek, and floated out like the air itself was lighter. Her car lights faded down the road. I stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at my reflection. The woman in the glass looked calm, but behind that calm, something else had woken up. The part of me that Thomas used to call the watchdog. I went to the kitchen, tore a page from the grocery pad, and wrote his name. Ethan Cole. Underneath it, just 2 words. Feels rehearsed? I slid the note into the drawer beside the phone and turned off the lights. That night, I didn't sleep, because sometimes when someone says all the right things, you don't feel safe. You feel watched. And I had the feeling that from now on, Gagokien in my own house with my own daughter, I was the one being studied. It started small, the kind of moment you almost ignore. One Tuesday night, Claire and Ethan came by after work. Nothing special, just dinner, laughter, the smell of pasta sauce filling the house. But while Claire was setting the table, I noticed Ethan walking around my living room like a man memorizing a floor plan. He wasn't just looking, he was studying. His eyes paused on the bookshelf, the family photos, the framed patents Thomas left behind. Then, just for a second, he stopped at the little fireproof safe near the wall, the one I kept behind the armchair. Most guests never noticed it. He did. "Beautiful home," he said, still looking around. "Thomas built this?" "He did," I said, drying my hands. Ethan smiled. "Must have been good with numbers. Engineers usually are. Did he ever invest?" He said the word softly, like it didn't matter. But it did. That's when my stomach tightened, the same quiet warning I'd felt years ago, right before a patient's heart monitor started to flatline. Later that night, after they'd eaten, Claire started talking about Ethan's new project. "Mom," she said proudly, "Ethan's opening a medical charity fund for mental health patients to help low-income families. Isn't that amazing?" I nodded slowly. "That's wonderful. Is it through the hospital?" Ethan smiled, that same calm, practiced way. "We're partnering with them," he said, still in the paperwork stage. "These things take time." Claire reached for his hand. "He's already designing the logo and the proposal. You should see it, Mom. It looks so professional." I smiled back, but I could feel the air in the room change. Something about the way he said partnering, like a man who'd learned the word from a brochure, not a contract. When they left, I waited until the headlights disappeared, then sat down at the table. "I've been a nurse for 30 years. You learn to trust your gut, not because it's magic, but because details never lie." So I opened my laptop, went to the hospital's website, and searched every page for Ethan Cole. Nothing, no partnership, no fund, no press release. Just silence. The next morning, I got an email from Dr. Ethan Cole, MD, Harvard Medical. Subject, Thomas Ross Memorial Fund, draft proposal. He'd attached a PDF and wrote, "Would love your feedback, Mrs. Ross. Thought it might honor Thomas's legacy." I printed it out and laid it on the kitchen table under the yellow lamp. The house was quiet, just the clock ticking and the sea breeze through the window, and as I read, my nurse's eyes turned into an investigator's. At first glance, it looked official. Harvard crest at the top, hospital name, donation forms, even a fake donor list. But then the cracks started to show. A period where there should have been a comma, a capital letter in the wrong place, a line spacing that didn't match from page to page. Little things, the kind liars always forget. And then, at the bottom of the page, I saw it. The Harvard logo. It looked right, until I turned the paper slightly. The crest, that tiny circle beneath the word Veritas, was flipped. The logo was printed backward. My hand actually trembled. Because that's not a mistake you make if you've ever worked there. That's the mistake of someone who's pretending. I turned the lamp down, sat back, and stared at the paper. You know that moment when you stop doubting yourself? That was mine. My instincts had been whispering for weeks, and now they were screaming. I whispered it out loud just to hear it. When people lie, they forget the small things. And it's the small things that destroy them. The next day, I checked the hospital registry again. No Ethan Cole listed as a physician, no charity paperwork filed with the county, no medical license under that name. Nothing. So that night, when they stopped by again, I was ready. Claire was cheerful, talking about fundraising dinners and grant letters. Ethan stood behind her, smiling, holding a folder like it was a prop. When she left the room to grab dessert, he looked around again, slow, curious, eyes flicking once more toward that same safe. "Thomas must have done well," he said casually. "Engineers always have good investments. If you ever need help reviewing old assets or updating documents, I'd be happy to assist." His tone was friendly, helpful, but I heard the subtext loud and clear. I'm mapping what's yours. I met his eyes. We managed just fine, Ethan. Thank you. He smiled, the way people do when they realize they've overplayed their hand. Of course, he said softly, just trying to be useful. After they left, I pulled out a notebook, plain blue covers, and started a list. Ethan Cole, suspicious details, asked about Thomas's investments, charity paperwork, multiple typos, Harvard logo mirrored, no license record, looks at safe, twice. 5 lines. Nothing dramatic, but when you've lived long enough, you know that a house doesn't collapse all at once. It starts with a crack so small, you could miss it if you weren't paying attention. And I was paying attention. That night, I sat in the glow of that same yellow lamp, staring at those 5 lines and whispered, "All right, Dr. Cole. Let's see who you really are." Sometimes warnings don't come from enemies. They come from people who still care, quietly, awkwardly, but deeply. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the message. "Mrs. Ross, this is Oliver Reed. Could we meet sometime soon? It's about Claire." Oliver. I hadn't heard that name in months. He used to work with Claire at Hope Aid. Same team, same long hours in storm zones, same heart for people who had nothing left. I always liked him. He was the kind of man who showed up early, stayed late, and never needed to be thanked. So when he said, "It's about Claire," I didn't hesitate. Me. Harbor Cafe, 4:30. Oliver, I'll be there. Harbor Cafe sits near the Bay Shore Pier. Small place, smells like cinnamon, old wood, and salt. I got there early, ordered black coffee I didn't drink, and waited. Oliver came in wearing that same brown jacket he'd worn at Thomas's memorial, the one that always looked a size too big, like he hadn't grown into his kindness yet. He smiled nervously, sat down, and slid his phone across the table. "Mrs. Ross," he said, voice low, "I think you need to see this." I turned the screen. It was Ethan, tuxedo, champagne glass in hand, standing under golden lights beside a woman I didn't know. His hand rested at her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. The caption read, "Fundraiser partner, Boston Gala." The timestamp? 3 weeks ago? My stomach didn't drop. It didn't need to. It just went cold. The kind of cold that starts in your chest and spreads slow, like truth finally catching up to denial. "Where did you get this?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. "A friend from Hope Aid sent it to the group chat. She thought it was Claire's boyfriend and didn't know what to say." I stared at the photo. Ethan's smile was perfect, a mirror of the one he'd given me at my dinner table. "Who's the woman?" I asked. He shook his head. "No clue. Her badge says donor relations. I tried searching the event page, but everything's private." We sat there for a moment, both pretending to stir our coffee. The milk steamer hissed like a secret being kept. Then he said quietly, "Mrs. Ross, I know this might sound selfish, but I care about Claire. Always have. I'm not saying this because I'm jealous. I'm saying it because she trusts him completely. And that scares me." I looked at him, really looked. The guilt in his eyes wasn't romantic, it was honest. And I realized something. He wasn't trying to take Ethan down. He was trying to keep Claire safe. So was I. "Oliver," I said gently, "you did the right thing." He hesitated. "What are you going to do?" "Find out who she is," I said. Quietly. He nodded, shoulders relaxing a little. "If you need help, anything, I'm here." When we stood to leave, he put his hand on my shoulder, just briefly, like a son might. "You're not alone. In this, Mrs. Ross," he said. And I felt the truth in it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear things that aren't there. Pipes settling, the clock ticking too loud, the sea tapping the windows like it wanted to be let in. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the old cedar box where I kept Thomas's things. Inside were letters, our wedding photo, and the last text he sent me before he passed. "Protect her, Evie, even when she doesn't understand why." I stared at that line for a long time. He'd said it once in the hospital, too, when his voice was barely a whisper, and I had promised him. I turned on the lamp, the same yellow one by my reading chair, and opened my notebook again, the one labeled Ethan Cole, Notes. At the bottom of the list, I added a new line. Boston Gala, Ethan with unidentified woman. 3 weeks ago. Caption, fundraiser partner. No record in hospital log. Then I opened my laptop. Oliver had already sent the photo, the full version, time-stamped with metadata. I downloaded it, printed 2 copies, and placed one inside the notebook. The other I tucked beside Thomas's will in the safe. Because when a man lies with charm, you need receipts, not rage. I went further. I found the Boston Gala's official website, scrolled through their sponsor list, and found no mention of Ethan Cole. But I did find the woman. Her name was Vanessa Marks, independent consultant, donor relations. A short bio, partnered with several private foundations in healthcare philanthropy. No company name, no traceable address, just like Ethan, polished, vague, unfindable. I checked the metadata on the photo again. The timestamp didn't match the event's published schedule, meaning he'd been there earlier before the fundraiser started. Private meeting? Setup? My mind raced. Around midnight, I texted Claire, "Are you home, sweetheart?" She replied seconds later with a heart emoji and a photo of flowers. The card read, "For the future we're building, Ethan." I stared at that photo for a long time. Her joy was real. His wasn't. And the thought of it made my throat tighten. I whispered into the dark, "You said to protect her, Thomas. Even if she hates me for it, I'm trying." I walked to the window. The bay outside was silver, the moon slicing across it like a blade. The reflection of the safe glimmered faintly in the glass, the same one Ethan had looked at twice. Now I understood why. At 2 a.m, I sent Oliver one more message. "Thank you. Keep your eyes open. Don't contact him directly." He replied instantly, "Understood." I turned my phone face down, shut off the lamp, and let the darkness fill the room. Sleep never came, but something else did. A sense of purpose. The kind that starts quiet like a mother's instinct and grows into armor. I realized something that night. When you become a mother, you stop being afraid of monsters under the bed, because one day they start coming for your children, and you learn how to hunt them back. There's a certain kind of silence that only exists before a storm, the kind where even the house seems to hold its breath. That night, my house smelled of roast chicken and rosemary. The candles were lit. Jazz hummed low from the old radio. Everything looked peaceful, and nothing about it was. I'd invited Ethan to dinner. Claire thought it was my way of bonding. She'd even said, "Come see, Mom. I told you you'd like him once you got to know him better." I smiled. But deep down, I already knew this dinner wasn't about getting to know him. It was about finding out who he really was. The 3 of us sat at the table, me at the head, Claire on my right, Ethan across from me. Candlelight flickered on his cufflinks. He smiled that perfect smile, practiced down to the molecule. "How was your day, Mrs. Ross?" he asked. "Oh, busy," I said. "One of the nurses fainted during the morning shift. I had to cover." He laughed politely, as if human exhaustion was charming. Dinner began quietly, forks, plates, soft chatter, the kind of calm that only works if you don't listen too hard. Then, halfway through the meal, I looked up and asked, very casually, "So, Ethan, remind me again, where did you say you studied medicine?" He didn't blink. "Harvard, class of 2011. Smooth, automatic, like he'd said it 1,000 times. I cut another piece of chicken, nodded slowly. "That's funny," I said, "because I took some nursing specialization classes through Harvard Medical the same year. I used to volunteer at Mass General on weekends." He smiled. "Small world, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. "Very small." I let that hang in the air for a second. Then I added softly, "I never heard your name, though, and I tend to remember the doctors who treated our unit." For the first time there was a flicker, a split second where his eyes darted, just a twitch, then he recovered. "Harvard has thousands of students, Mrs. Ross. We can't all know each other." Claire laughed lightly, not sensing the shift. "That's true, Mom. You probably just never crossed paths." "Probably," I said. But my eyes never left his. Later, when Claire went to the kitchen to bring dessert, the air between us changed. The music had stopped. Only the sound of the clock ticking and the faint hiss of candle wax. He leaned back in his chair, studied me, and for the first time I saw it, the real man behind the performance, polite mask gone, charming edges sharpened. "You don't like me very much," he said quietly. I met his gaze. "I don't trust you." He smiled slow. That's fair. Mothers rarely trust the men who take their daughters away. Only the ones who try to take everything, I replied. He tilted his head. Everything? Let's not pretend, Ethan. I lowered my voice. You've asked questions about Thomas's patents, about Claire's accounts, about my house. You know more about our finances than any fiancé should. He chuckled, that same laugh people use when they're trying to make truth sound ridiculous. You're misreading concern for interest, Mrs. Ross. I just care about her future. Do you? I asked. Then, after a pause, tell me, Ethan. Do you love my daughter? Or her money? His smile froze midair. For a beat, the candlelight caught his eyes, and I swear they went cold. Finally, he leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice soft but cutting. Love, Mrs. Ross, he said, is a kind of investment. Don't you agree? He let the words sit there, gleaming and poisonous. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. The man sitting across from me wasn't a doctor. He was a predator, patient, articulate, and dangerous enough to believe his own lies. When Claire came back with dessert, the mask was back on. Ethan was all warmth again, helping her with plates, making small jokes, complimenting her cake. But I saw what was underneath now, and once you see a snake's fangs, you stop hearing the music of its hiss. After they left, I sat alone at the table, the candles burning low. The dishes were still warm, the wine untouched. I could still hear his voice in my head. Love is an investment? That was the moment I knew. He wasn't just dangerous, he was calculating. And the clock was running out. I picked up my phone, opened my messages to Oliver, and typed 3 words. You were right. Then I closed the notebook where I kept every detail and whispered into the empty room. All right, Thomas. The storm's here. I learned a long time ago, you don't fight a clever man with anger. You fight him with patience, paper, and other people who know how to read the fine print. The next morning I drove to the hospital where I've worked for 30 years. I told myself I was going in for a cup of bad coffee and a friendly face. Mostly, I wanted Hannah Lee. Hannah's been my friend since residency days. The kind of friend who's seen the good and the ugly and still shows up with a thermos and a plan. She's a few years older than me, quick with a joke and quicker with a spreadsheet. Last time I saw her, she wiped my cheeks in the staff room when Thomas took his last breath. If anyone would help me turn suspicion into something solid, it would be her. She met me in the admin office under fluorescent lights that make everything look too honest. I set the printed Thomas Ross Memorial Fund draft on the desk and watched as she skimmed it like she was peeling tape off an old wound. Her brow tightened in that way it always does when she smells something off. Let me see the headers, she said, and I did. She ran the logo through a search, checked the fonts, scrolled through the metadata like someone reading a patient's history for hidden notes. No listing, she said after a few minutes. No Cole in our clinician roster. No volunteer registration under that name. If he'd done residency or fellowship here or in Boston with an affiliation that mattered, we'd have a record somewhere. We pulled up state medical license lookups. We checked Boston hospital directories. We called a colleague at one of the teaching hospitals who still remembers everyone who came through the wards. Nothing. Hannah tapped the PDF with her nail. This looks assembled, she said, like someone copied parts from different places and tried to stitch a badge together. She pointed out the tiny things I would have missed if I didn't spend half my life reading charts. A stray comma, 2 different font types in the same header, a watermark shifted slightly left on the page. Little errors, she said. Liars forget the details. I told her what Oliver had sent, the gala picture, and she didn't look surprised. She only narrowed her eyes, like the pieces were dropping into place on a board she already understood. Men like this don't disappear, Hannah said quietly, leaning back in her chair. They change names. They learn new lines. They cultivate a halo. They recycle sympathy. She tapped the desk, but they always leave shadows. We just have to find them. That line, they recycle sympathy and neo, stayed with me. It was disturbingly accurate. Hannah made a few calls while I sat and drank terrible hospital coffee. She reached a contact in Boston who handles event staffing and asked about the gala. Within an hour, she had a name she could pass to me, a consultant who organizes private fundraisers and sometimes hides donor lists for privacy. The consultant's email lined up with the gala photos Oliver found, and the consultant had arranged rooms and VIP passes. Not a direct lead to Ethan yet, but enough to show the gala was more private than public, and that someone had let him in. We didn't stop there. Hannah pulled hospital admin records, cross-referenced vendor lists, and helped me map out every document tied to the word fund. The more we looked, the more the draft looked less like a proposal and more like a prop. Someone had created the language of a fund without understanding budgets, timetables, procurement. The routing number on the draft? It routed to a holding account, one of those escrow-style accounts used by third-party processors. Clean on the surface. Hard to trace if you're not looking. By midday, my hands felt steadier than they had in weeks. I had paper, I had a list, I had a friend who could read a file like a map. I had more than a feeling. I had something that could be shown, not argued. That afternoon, I called Detective Linda Torres. I'd met Linda once before when a case crossed into the hospital. She's efficient, not flashy, the kind of cop who keeps her patience like an instrument. I told her everything. The PDF, the mirrored logo, the gala photo, the weird routing number, the P.O. box address. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a beat, then asked the question I was waiting for. "Do you have enough to arrest him today?" I shook my head. "Not yet." Linda's mouth tightened. "Good," she said, "because an arrest now might just send him packing. He's clean enough on the surface to disappear fast. We need him to step into his own trap." Trap? The word felt wild coming out of my mouth, but I'd grown used to that since Thomas's death, doing wild things to keep my daughter safe. "Yes," Linda said. "We've handled charity fraud before. They love the optics, they love the headlines, and they always want to be the ones who help transfer large sums. If we can make him think a big donation is coming through, he'll show his hand, he'll ask for control, or he'll try to move money, or he'll send someone to meet. When he does that, we trace and we freeze." She outlined a plan slow and methodical. Create a believable donor scenario, set up a monitored escrow account, make sure bank details look real, and prepare legal cover so when he moves money we have a paper trail. Most importantly, she said, do not confront him. Let him take the bait while we record and document. You keep playing the part. We'll be ready to act when the line is crossed. Hannah nodded. We can make the proposal look right. Fonts, headers, real-sounding budget lines. Evie, if you want, I'll draft the version that looks legitimate. We'll make the logo perfect. We'll give it the texture of authenticity. I felt two things at once, a knot of guilt and a wash of relief. The guilt because I was about to stage a deception to catch a deception. The relief because I was not doing it alone. Okay, I said finally, we do it the right way. Carefully, legal, and we don't tell Claire. Linda's eyes softened a fraction. She'll hate you for a while, Linda said, but if this works, she won't be the person who has to learn the lesson through ruin. I left the hospital that evening with a folder of copies and a plan that felt like armor. Hannah hugged me at the door, brief, dry, no sentimentality wasted. We'll make it convincing, she said. He won't know what hit him. I drove home thinking of Thomas, how he used to say the world was made of detail and stubbornness. I thought of that promise. Protect her, Evie. Now I had paper, partners, and a detective who knew how to trap a liar. I had the kind of allies a plan needs. We were ready to bait the hook. We planned the trap slowly, like anyone who's raised a child does the hard things. One careful stitch at a time so nothing falls apart. Hannah had written the draft to look real. Linda had the legal hooks ready. My job was simple in theory and crushing in reality. Play the part of the mother who would hand a fund over to the man she trusted. I started the story at supper. I told Claire, the way you tell a secret you want to sound ordinary. Low and steady, no drama. I've been updating Thomas's will, I said. There might be enough to seed a memorial fund, something for hospital mental health programs. I'm thinking around $500,000. Claire laughed then cried. The sound of somebody who finally believed something good could come from grief. 500,000? She said, breathless. Mom, that's amazing. She hugged me until I could feel every bone in her back. I let her because she needed that moment. I needed it too. Later, she called Ethan, bright with that hopeful glow that always makes me want to close my eyes. She told him about the memorial fund, how it might help patients who can't afford care. He listened like a man who had been waiting to be useful. No need to worry, he said when Claire handed the phone to me. If you'd like, Mrs. Ross, I can help set up the fund structure, draft the proposal, and connect potential donors. I have templates and several contacts who can assist. He said it casually, like he was offering to bring over a casserole, but the eagerness in his voice sounded different to me. It sounded like appetite. "Would you mind putting that in writing?" I asked, calm. "Just an email summarizing the steps and how you'd manage the initial donation? I'd like everything in writing before we do anything." He didn't hesitate. "Of course," he said. "I'll send it to your email tonight." When the message arrived a little while later, I opened it in the kitchen under the small lamp. Subject line: Thomas Ross Memorial Fund. Initial proposal and account details. It read professional, too professional, and it had everything you'd expect on paper: a staged timeline, a list of advisory roles, and a neat signature block. Dr. Ethan Cole, MD. My hands were steady as I printed it. On the page, the proposal included a bank routing number and an account labeled for initial donations. I checked the micro details the way Hannah taught me to: the fonts, the spacing, the header. The logo looked polished at a glance, Harvard-like, imposing, but when you know the crest, the tiny ring sits different. The signature itself, a vector font pretending to be a cursive hand, not a scanned signature, not a real doctor's pen stroke. The part that stopped my breath was the account details. An offshore account in the Cayman Islands listed as the escrow for initial funds. The language read, "Upon receipt of donation, funds will be placed in escrow at Bank X, Cayman Islands, to be managed pending board approval." Offshore. Escrow. Those are words people use when they want money to be invisible. I copied the email header and the full raw message to a thumb drive, printed a hard copy, and saved both into the folder labeled Ethan Cole, Documents. I felt ridiculous doing it and grateful all at once. This was the smallest, ugliest part of what I had to do: save receipts like a shopkeeper saving her till tape. Then I forwarded everything straight to Linda. The subject line was short and steady: urgent, proposal and offshore account attached. I included the printed pages and a note. He offered to manage. Account offshore. Please advise. Linda answered within the hour. Received. This establishes probable cause. Prepare to stand by. We have approval to seek a warrant upon a transfer attempt. Do not confront him. Maintain normal contact. We will monitor. Reading her words, I felt a heavy kind of relief settle in my chest. The plan had teeth now. Linda's team would watch the account. If Ethan tried to move money or asked for signatures to transfer, the banks would be able to freeze it. They would have a clear paper trail. They would have cause. There's a private kind of shame that comes with tricking someone to expose themselves. For one breath, I hated myself, playing with my daughter's happiness to catch a crook. Then I put my hand on the old photograph of Thomas on the mantel and remembered his voice. Protect her, even when she doesn't understand. That was all the permission I needed. Linda's phone call came later that evening, low and brisk. "We've got clearance. We'll move when he makes a financial step. Stay available. Don't do anything dramatic." I said I understood, though my throat felt tight. We both knew the rest. Waiting is its own kind of work. I walked to the mantel, touched the black and white photo of Thomas, and whispered, "I kept my promise." The lamps outside made the bake glitter like a smudge of silver. I held the thumb drive in my pocket like a small, heavy stone and sat down at the kitchen table. The trap was set. Now we waited for the fox to take the chicken. The morning of the wedding looked like it had been painted just for her. Bayshore Bay was calm, the air bright and heavy with salt. Rows of white chairs curved neatly along the sand, ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and a small string quartet tuned up under a white canopy. It was the kind of day any mother would dream of, except this one. The camera would have loved it. Every detail was perfect. But I knew the truth. Perfection was the calmest mask before a storm. Inside the bridal suite, Claire stood in front of the mirror. Her dress shimmered like soft light on water, the lace delicate as breath. She smiled, that old wide smile that used to make Thomas laugh. For a second I saw my little girl again, the one who still believed love was a promise no one could break. I walked over, fixed the strap on her shoulder, and pretended my hands weren't shaking. She looked at me through the mirror and whispered, "I hope Dad can see this." I swallowed the lump in my throat and answered, "If he's watching, sweetheart, he's standing right next to you." She smiled again, and I almost wished I could freeze that moment. Before truth arrived, before the world shifted. Outside, the ceremony crew moved like clockwork. Guests arrived in bright summer clothes, laughing, taking pictures. The air smelled like flowers and champagne. If I didn't know better, I would have believed it was a day for love. Then Ethan appeared. He walked down the beach in a white suit, the sun bouncing off his smile like a movie scene. He was handsome, confident, exactly what every mother would want for her daughter. Everyone turned to look at him. Compliments, laughter, applause. He greeted people with that same charm that had fooled us all. Everyone except me. Because I'd seen what was behind that smile. I'd heard his voice on recordings, cold, calculated, talking about my daughter like she was an investment plan. So I watched him, not like a mother watching her future son-in-law, but like a soldier waiting for the signal to strike. The music softened. A gentle breeze brushed across the sand, carrying the smell of salt and white roses. I reached for my purse. Inside was a plain white envelope, but what it held could end everything. Printed emails, offshore account details, and a USB drive containing the testimonies of 2 women Ethan had conned before, one from Nevada, one from Oregon. Their voices trembled but didn't break. They talked about a Dr. Ethan Cole who promised them love, business, and partnership, and left them with nothing. Hearing them again the night before nearly broke me, but I needed their truth to stand beside mine. I slipped the envelope deeper into the purse and took my seat in the front row. The live stream camera panned across the crowd, guests smiling, glasses clinking, the ocean sparkling like a mirror. For a second it stopped on me. I smiled, small and polite, but my eyes were steady, cold as the tide. People watching the live feed probably thought I was just an emotional mother, maybe a little nervous, maybe a little proud. They didn't know that every second ticking toward I do was a countdown, not to a wedding, but to justice. I spotted Detective Linda Torres at the back of the crowd, disguised in a linen dress, sunglasses reflecting the sea. She caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. That was all I needed. Everything was in place. Claire turned to me one last time before walking down the aisle. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm so happy." I forced a smile and answered, "Then keep that, baby. Just remember, real love never starts with a lie." She didn't understand, not yet. A gust of wind lifted her veil, brushing it across my face like a whisper. For a moment I could almost hear Thomas. "Do what you have to, Evie, protect her." And I knew I would. The music swelled. Guests rose. Claire stepped onto the sand, radiant and glowing. Ethan waited at the altar, every inch the perfect groom. The world was watching through their phones and cameras. But they didn't know the story behind the smiles, that in my purse was a quiet storm waiting to strike. Because this wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a setup. And before the day was over, the man in the white suit would trade his vows for handcuffs. The ceremony began with the ocean humming behind us, calm and endless. The minister's voice carried softly over the waves. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Claire stood beneath the white arch, veil lifted by the wind, eyes shining. Ethan looked perfect, a man from a dream. But every time he smiled at her, I could hear his voice from that recording. Cold, rehearsed, hungry. I kept my hand on my purse, feeling the shape of the phone, the envelope, the USB. My heart beat slow, heavy. I counted the words in the minister's speech. I knew exactly when my line would come. "If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony," the minister said, "speak now, or forever hold your peace." The world went still, and I stood up. For one frozen second, only the sound of the sea remained. Dozens of faces turned toward me, confused, whispering, cameras trembling in the air. Claire's voice broke through the silence, desperate and frightened. "Mom, please, don't." But I couldn't stop now, not after months of lies, not after Thomas's promise. I lifted my phone so everyone could see the screen. My voice didn't shake. "This," I said, "is an email sent by Dr. Ethan Cole, or whatever his name really is." I began to read aloud. "Thomas Ross Memorial Fund, transfer request $500,000, signed Ethan Cole, MD, Harvard University." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. I could hear the waves rising behind me, louder now, crashing against the sand like a warning. Then I looked straight at him. "You're not a doctor. You're not even who you say you are. You're a liar and a thief." Ethan's smile faltered just for a second before he forced it back. He laughed, shaking his head. "She's delusional," he said, voice tight but practiced. "She's been unstable since her husband died. Claire, honey, sit her down." But his eyes betrayed him, darting, calculating, searching for an exit. I didn't move. "You think I'm lying?" I said quietly. "Then maybe everyone should hear what you sound like when you're not pretending." I tapped play. From the phone's speaker came his voice, unmistakable. "Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. Give me 6 months and I'll be gone." The sound sliced through the air like glass. Gasps, murmurs, people standing. Claire froze, her face pale, lips trembling. "Ethan," she whispered, what is that?" He stepped forward, hands raised, voice quick. "That's not me, someone's editing audio." Before he could finish, 2 uniformed officers appeared from the back of the crowd. Detective Linda Torres walked beside them, calm, steady, her badge glinting in the light. "Ethan Cole," she said, her voice sharp but level. "Or should I say Bradley Wilson? You're under arrest for fraud and identity. Theft." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. The waves seemed to crash louder. Ethan tried to laugh again, but the sound was thin, hollow. "This is a mistake." The officer turned him around, snapped the cuffs. He looked at me as they led him away. Not angry, not even shocked, just exposed. And for the first time since I met him, I saw who he really was. Small, ordinary, powerless. Claire's bouquet slipped from her hands. She stood frozen, eyes wide, whispering, "Mom, what just happened?" I walked to her slowly, cupped her face in my hands. "You just saw the truth, sweetheart," I said. "And it's better to see it now than live blind forever." She started to cry. The minister stepped back, the guests whispered, and the sound of the sea filled the silence once more. I looked toward the horizon, toward the sky where Thomas used to say heaven must be, and whispered, "It's done, Thomas. I kept my promise." The waves crashed again, harder this time, washing away the footprints on the sand, as if the ocean itself was helping me erase the lie that had almost become my daughter's life. The world seemed to hold its breath. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was the ocean and the distant flutter of the silk canopy. Then a woman's voice cut through the silence, trembling but fierce. "He did the same to me." Heads turned, cameras swung. A woman stood near the back, maybe late 30s, holding up her phone, her face pale against the glare of the sun. Her live stream was running, tens of thousands of viewers watching in real time. "His name was Matthew Sloan when I met him," she said. "He took everything, my savings, my trust, everything." The guests gasped. The whispers became waves. Someone shouted, "Is this real?" Another murmured, "It's all over TikTok already." Detective Linda Torres stepped forward, badge glinting against the sunlight, her voice clear and cutting through the chaos. "Ethan Cole, alias Matthew Sloan, alias Bradley Wilson, you are under arrest for multiple counts of fraud and identity theft across 3 states. The crowd erupted. Gasps, phones lifted, camera shutters clicking like a storm of judgment. Ethan's eyes darted between the detective, the crowd, and the sea behind him. For a split second, I saw the calculation flicker in his gaze, that same survival instinct that had probably saved him a dozen times before. And then he ran. He pushed past 2 guests, knocking over a chair, sprinting toward the dunes. His polished shoes slipped in the sand, and the crowd screamed. The live stream camera followed, shaky, breathless, the kind of chaos you can't fake. "He's running," someone shouted. Linda gave a quick signal, and the officers took off after him. I could hear their footsteps pounding against the wood deck, then the grunt of impact as one officer tackled him near the tide line. For a moment, the only sound was the surf and Ethan's muffled shout. Then the metallic click of handcuffs. The live stream caught everything. Within minutes, the comments exploded across the feed. "Oh my God! This is insane. Justice served live." Even standing there, I could hear the digital wave spreading, notifications pinging, people typing furiously, the story leaving Bayshore Beach and spilling into the world. I didn't care about the internet. I didn't care about the views or the noise. I only cared about the sound of my daughter's voice. When I turned back, Claire was on her knees in the sand, her veil tangled around her arm, her face blank with shock. Her bouquet lay broken beside her. I went to her, knees sinking into the cold, wet sand, and pulled her into my arms. She didn't say anything. She just buried her face against me and shook. Around us, the crowd murmured, phones still raised, the music long forgotten. The waves kept rolling in, erasing the footprints, washing away the chaos. I held her tighter, whispering into her hair, "It's over, sweetheart. It's over now." She sobbed once, a sound that broke something in me, and whispered, "Why did he do it, Mom? Why? I didn't have an answer that could make it hurt less, so I told her the only truth I knew. Because some people don't know how to love, only how to take, but he won't take anything from you ever again. Behind us, the officers pulled Ethan to his feet. His perfect suit was streaked with sand and seaweed, his mask gone. When he looked at me, I didn't see anger anymore. I saw fear. And strangely, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just the quiet relief of a storm finally passing. The live stream continued to buzz, capturing every second. But for me, the world had narrowed down to two people, my daughter and me. As I held her, the tide crept closer, soaking the hem of her ruined wedding gown. The salt burned against my skin, but I didn't move. I looked up at the horizon and the endless line where the sea met the sky, and whispered to the wind, "You see that, Thomas? I kept my word." The camera caught us there, a mother and daughter drenched in truth, framed against the roaring waves. And somewhere, beneath the noise of 1,000 online comments, justice finally found its quiet. By sunrise the next morning, the story had already left Bayshore Bay and crossed the country. Every headline seemed to scream the same words: "Mother saves daughter, live at wedding." Clips of the arrest flooded social media, edited, looped, dissected by strangers. There was the moment I stood up, the gasp when I read Ethan's fake email, the running, the sand, the handcuffs. Millions watched it before breakfast. News anchors called it the most shocking wedding in America. Talk shows called me the fearless mother. They played dramatic background music and slow motion clips of me holding Claire on the sand. But none of them showed what came after. They didn't show Claire curled up in my guest room that night, still wearing the remains of her wedding dress. They didn't hear her wake up crying, whispering his name like a bad dream she couldn't escape. I didn't care about viral fame or hashtags. I only cared about my daughter breathing through the pain. A week later, the police finished their investigation. Ethan Cole, a.k.a. Matthew Sloan, a.k.a. Bradley Wilson, was charged with multiple counts of federal fraud and identity theft. 12 years in prison. The sentence came fast, faster than anyone expected, because the evidence was impossible to deny. Emails, recordings, bank trails, and the video that half the country had already seen. When I got the call from Detective Linda Torres, she said, "It's over, Evelyn. You did it." But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like quiet. The kind that settles over a battlefield after everyone's gone home. Reporters kept calling. Producers offered me interviews, book deals, even a movie adaptation. I said no to all of them. I wasn't interested in becoming a headline. The truth didn't need a camera anymore. Claire spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Shock, exhaustion, trauma. The doctor said her heart rate spiked every time she heard the ocean. So I brought her flowers that didn't smell like salt. I sat by her bed reading old notes from her father's journals, his quiet words about resilience, about how love isn't what saves us. Courage does. Sometimes she would stare out the window and whisper, "I still don't understand how I didn't see it, Mom." I told her softly, "Because you wanted to believe in something good. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." One afternoon, the sky outside turned gold with late sunlight. She turned to me, eyes tired but clear, and said, "I was wrong, Mom. I trusted the wrong man." I smiled, brushed her hair from her forehead, and answered, "You didn't trust the wrong man. You just trusted too soon. There's a difference." She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "You never trusted him." "You were right all along." I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, I wasn't right. I was scared. I've lived long enough to know that love can blind even the smartest heart." Claire smiled, faintly. "You never stopped protecting me." "That's my job," I said, "and someday it'll be yours too." There was silence for a moment, the kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore. It just breathes. Later that evening, I sat alone on the porch overlooking the bay. The same water that had witnessed everything, the wedding, the lies, the truth. Now it looked peaceful again, like nothing had ever happened. In the distance, a sailboat crossed the horizon, and I thought of Thomas, of his last words, "Protect her, even when she doesn't understand." I had kept that promise. It had cost us both, but it had also saved her life. Behind me, the TV played softly. Another segment about our story. The anchor smiled into the camera and said, "Sometimes justice wears pearls instead of a badge." I turned it off. Justice didn't wear pearls. It wore the quiet relief of a mother holding her daughter while the world watched. It wore forgiveness, the hard, necessary kind. As the sun slipped behind the waves, Claire's voice came from the doorway. "Mom," she said, "can I sit with you?" I nodded. She brought her blanket, sat beside me, and leaned her head on my shoulder. We watched the sea fade into night, and for the first time in months, the sound of the waves didn't feel like a warning. It felt like peace. 6 months passed. The waves at Bayshore sounded softer now, not like thunder, but like breathing. Time has a way of sanding down even the sharpest edges. Claire and I had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about turning pain into something that could protect someone else. That's how Safe Heart Foundation was born. A place for women who'd been deceived, manipulated, or broken by the kind of men who wear masks instead of hearts. We started in the church basement, the same church where everything had fallen apart. This time, there were no flowers, no cameras, no dresses, just a circle of folding chairs, a pot of coffee, and a small handwritten sign taped to the wall. Safe Heart Foundation. You're not alone. Our first meeting drew 12 women. They came from all over, teachers, nurses, accountants, widows. Some still wore their wedding rings, twisting them nervously as they spoke. No one knew what to expect, neither did we. Claire opened the session. Her voice shook at first. We started this foundation because we know how it feels to believe in someone who didn't deserve it, she said, and we want to make sure none of us ever have to carry that shame alone. One by one, the women began to share stories of stolen savings, fake love, fake names. Some cried, some laughed through tears, and in the middle of it all, one woman, maybe in her 50s, clutched her hands together and whispered, "I thought I was stupid, but now I know. I was just hurt." The room went quiet. That kind of silence only comes when truth finally finds its voice. Claire looked at me from across the circle, eyes glistening. In that moment, I didn't see the girl in the wedding dress anymore. I saw a woman, a from strong, scarred, and reborn. She leaned closer and whispered, "You didn't just save me, Mom. You saved all of them." I reached out, squeezed her hand. "No, honey. We saved each other." Outside, sunlight streamed through the tall windows, cutting soft golden lines across the floor. It lit up the circle of faces, women who'd once been broken but were now sitting taller, breathing easier. Somewhere in the distance you could still hear the ocean, faint but steady. Like it was listening, too. After the meeting ended, we stayed behind to clean up. Laughter replaced the old silence. Someone played an old song on their phone, and for a few minutes the room felt almost like home. When we stepped outside, the late afternoon sun painted the church steps in amber light. A delivery van idled nearby. The driver handed me a small bouquet wrapped in brown paper. There was no note, just a card tucked between the lilies. It read in neat handwriting, "Thank you for your courage." Oh. I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. Oliver. We hadn't spoken much since that day, but maybe that was okay. Some people enter your life not to stay, but to remind you what kindness feels like. Claire noticed the flowers and smiled. "From him?" she asked gently. I nodded. From someone who never stopped believing the truth matters. We walked down the steps together, the air crisp with sea breeze. The horizon glowed pink and gold, the same ocean but a different story. As we reached the boardwalk, Claire slipped her arm through mine. "You think we'll ever stop talking about what happened?" she asked. "Maybe not," I said, "but one day it'll stop hurting." The waves crashed softly below us, catching the last light of day, and for the first time in a long time I felt peace. Not because justice had been served, but because love had survived it. The camera would fade here, two silhouettes against the sea, holding on to each other. Mother and daughter, survivors. And somewhere, if you listened closely, you could almost hear Thomas's voice in the wind. "You kept your promise, Evelyn." 2 years later, the ocean still sings to us. Not with sorrow anymore, but with memory. Life has a strange rhythm. The same waves that once carried pain now carry peace. Claire met Oliver again by accident, or maybe fate just has good timing. He'd moved back to Cedar Ridge to teach photography at the local college. When she told me, her voice was calm, steady. No sparkle of naive excitement, just the quiet certainty of someone who'd learned what love should really feel like. They started small, coffee, long walks, stories shared without walls. Oliver never tried to fix her, he just listened. And for Claire, that was enough. When she told me they were getting married, I smiled and said, "Good. Just promise me one thing. No live stream this time." She laughed, and for the first time in years, it sounded like pure joy. The wedding was simple, no cameras, no audience, just a few friends, a handful of white flowers, and the ocean whispering behind us. The ceremony took place at dusk, the sky painted in rose and amber. Claire wore a simple linen dress, her hair pinned loosely, the breeze tugging at the ends. Oliver stood barefoot in the sand, holding her hands, his eyes never leaving hers. I watched from a few feet away, the wind brushing against my face, carrying the scent of salt and memory. There were no grand speeches, no crowds waiting for drama. Only truth, only peace. When they exchanged vows, I felt something inside me loosen. The last knot of fear, the last echo of the past. They weren't promising perfection. They were promising honesty. And after everything we'd lived through, that was more sacred than any fairy tale. As the sun sank lower, I turned to the small group gathered on the beach, the women from Safe Heart Foundation, my chosen family. We'd come full circle, from victims to survivors, to witnesses of love reborn the right way. I found myself speaking softly, almost to the sea, more than to the people. When the waves hit the shore, they don't destroy the sand, I said. They shape it. They make it new. That's what we've done. We didn't break. We became stronger. Claire smiled through tears. She reached for my hand, and together we walked toward the waterline. The tide was gentle that evening, small, patient, forgiving. We carried 2 white flowers, one each, for Thomas. For everything that had to fall apart so something better could grow. Standing ankle-deep in the surf, we released the flowers. They drifted away slowly, caught by the current, glowing gold beneath the dying sun. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rhythm of the waves, steady, eternal, and kind. I felt Claire's hand squeeze mine. "We made it, Mom," she whispered. I smiled. "We did. And the rest? The rest is just life." The camera would fade out here, a wide shot of 2 women standing in the ocean framed by a burning sky. No tears, no tragedy, just light. The piano would rise, gently, soft, and lingering, like the kind of music you hear right before the screen fades to black. And maybe, somewhere in that quiet, the audience would understand. Justice isn't the end of a story. Healing is.